Lincoln, before the Civil War, is a very articulate but fairly typical Northern political figure. I think his racial views are quite typical of Northern society at that time. I don't think he's more racist than most Northerners, but I don't think he's that much less racist either. His solution to the problem of race is colonization. That, he says this all the time before the Civil War, colonization. And I think one of the main, colonization being deporting blacks out of the country. Again, it goes back to this business of this America being a white country, a country for white people. Blacks are aliens. In one speech in 1854, his great Peoria speech, he says exactly, "What would I do with these slaves if they were freed?" He says, "I don't even know exactly. My first impulse is to send them to Africa, their native land." Now, that comment is a very interesting one, their native land. Africa was not the native land of black people by this time. The slave trade had long been cut off. All the blacks in the United States were born in America. They were African Americans. Africa was no more the native land of blacks than England was the native land of England, because his ancestors had come from England. But he couldn't think of them as real parts of American society. They're aliens. They're not, and by the way, he's not the only one. Jefferson said the same thing. Indeed, every major political leader of the pre-Civil War period virtually was in favor of colonization. You look at the colonization society, John Marshall, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, presidents, Monroe, Madison, Jackson, colonizationists. Stephen A. Douglas, Lincoln's great antagonist, colonizationist. Henry Clay, Lincoln's great model of a statesman, colonizationist. Jefferson. This was the sort of mainstream official policy. In some ways, it was to end slavery. You emancipate slaves and send them out of the country. In some ways, it was a way of getting rid of free blacks. Some Southerners said, yeah, we'll colonize the free blacks, but not the slaves. But it is not, it doesn't encompass within itself a vision of America as a multiracial or biracial society. And that's Lincoln's view up to the Civil War. Now, you can be a colonizationist and be anti-slavery, which he was. But it's only in the Civil War that Lincoln begins to rethink this, and it's partly because he comes into contact with talented, eloquent black people like Frederick Douglass, who he had never met before the Civil War. It's because of the service of black soldiers. 200,000 of them serve in the Union Army and Navy and make a tremendous impact on Lincoln's vision of race. And after the Emancipation Proclamation, Lincoln never talks about colonization again. He begins to realize that this is going to be a biracial society, and we're going to have to think about how black and white are going to live together in this country. So there is that growth. And that is what I think makes Lincoln a great man, this capacity to rethink old prejudices and old views under the pressure of events.